Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. So today we'll be discussing my February TBR and I'm really excited about it because I feel like this TBR is so much better, or at least interests me and appeals to me a little bit more than my January TBR. I said in that video that I felt like it was a bit meh in comparison to other months, and after looking at my pile of books for February, I couldn't agree more. That doesn't mean that I didn't like the books that I read in January. I'll obviously talk about those more in my January wrap up, but this TBR for February, like I said, very happy, top tier, and I cannot wait to dive into all of these books. February, of course, is Black History Month. Love to see it, love to hear it. So I will mostly be reading books written by Black authors and spotlighting those books and those authors on my channel throughout the month and 365, but especially throughout the month. And of course, February 14th is Valentine's Day, and being the hopeless romantic that I am and loving love as much as I do, I will of course be reading some Black romance books, and I'll be sharing those with you guys today. But before we get started, I just wanted to say, not too much on my hair, y'all, not too much on my hair. I am actually getting my hair done tomorrow, so what I got going on right now is a little bit temporary. Like I said, not too much on me. I just had to take out those braids. With all of that out of the way, let's get started. I'm not going to go in any particular order. I'm just going to pick up whatever book I see first, and the first book that I have here is The Rebel King by Kennedy Ryan. So this is actually the second book in the All Kingsmen duology. First book in the duology is The Kingmaker, and I actually read this in January, and I buddy read this with Rachel from Raven Haired Reader, and I love this book. I'm not going to get into my full thoughts. You'll have to stay tuned for my January wrap up, but just know that I love this book. I love Lennox, I love Maxim, and I think that they are going to go down as one of my favorite fictional couples of all time, period. We'll leave it at that. But like I was saying, The Rebel King is the second book in this duology, and so I'm not going to get into the synopsis for this book because this one picks up right where we left off in book one. And the way that book one ends, insane. It's actually wild how book one ends. So I'm really excited to dive into this one. I'm always excited to read more Kennedy Ryan, and I'm just so happy that I discovered this duology because I can definitely see these two books already being contenders for my favorite books of 2023 already. That's saying a lot. Like I said, I cannot wait to dive into The Rebel King. So the next book that I have here is Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. So this book has actually been sitting on my TBR for about a year at this point, and I don't know why I kept stalling on picking it up because it's so short, as you can see right here, and I think it's about like 150 something pages, so I really could have picked this up at any time and just banged it out within a couple of hours, but for some reason I've been stalling. But no more. I am finally going to get around to this in February, and I'm really excited about it because everybody that I have seen on Booktube or on Bookstagram that has read this book has given it glowing reviews. I have not seen one negative review on this book, which is incredible, especially because this is a short story, and I feel like short stories or novellas tend to get mixed reviews. Most people either feel like the story could have been longer, characters weren't fleshed out as well as they could have been, or the plot, and then some people feel as though that it was a perfect length. So it's really 50-50 for me. It really just depends. I don't really seek out novellas all like that, but if I find one that interests me, I will pick it up and give it a try. But I really do hope that I enjoy this one as much as other people. The only things that I know about this is that it follows two Black British people who I think are both creatives, and they end up falling in love with one another, but it's not as simple as that. I think there's other stuff that's going on within the outside world that is trying to prevent them from being together. And so I feel like the story is going to be very hard-hitting, very impactful, and I cannot wait to dive into it. Just quickly reading the flap here, it says, in a crowded London pub, two young people meet. Both are Black British. Both won scholarships to private schools where they struggled to belong. Both are now artists. He a photographer, she a dancer, and both are trying to make their mark in a world that by turn celebrates and rejects them. Tentatively, tenderly, they fall in love. But two people who seem destined to be together can still be torn apart by fear and violence, and over the course of a year, they find their relationship tested by forces beyond their control. That just sounds like it's going to be very moving. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to reading this one, and I know that Caleb Azuma Nelson has another book out, or he's at least working on another book, I'm pretty sure. Either way, I'm hoping that I enjoy this one, and so if I end up enjoying this one, then I would definitely check out his other books. The next book that I have here is a January leftover, and it is A Chance at Love by Beverly Jenkins. So y'all, I actually did a really great job. You guys are gonna be so proud of me when my January wrap up goes live because I stuck to my TBR pretty well. Like, for the most part, I read all of the books that I needed to read, with the exception of a few like this one, but that's fine because I always need a Beverly Jenkins book in my reading plans no matter what. I have talked about this book a few times in my other videos, but for those of you who might be new and might have just stumbled upon this video, I will give a brief synopsis. So this story follows follows a woman named Lorelai, and Lorelai is not your conventional woman. She is a gambler, and she also just has had a lot of life experiences that other women during this time period have not had, and so she pretty much is shunned and ostracized by her peers and society as a whole. But that doesn't really bother Lorelai. She is very headstrong. She also doesn't care what people think, and so she's always going to do what she wants to do. But she is actually on her way to California to start a new life, but before she gets to California, she does have to stop in Kansas, and while she's in Kansas, she somehow comes in contact with these two little girls who technically are orphaned, but they are raised by their uncle. But Lorelai and these girls end up forming a bond, and these little girls essentially ask Lorelai to be their new mama, which is just so heartbreaking. But Lorelai does take a liking to these girls, and so she does decide to stick around in Kansas a little bit more just to make sure that they're okay and just to really be that like motherly figure for them for the time being. But she ends up meeting the girl's uncle, Jake, and Jake is immediately smitten by Lorelai, and he really would love for her to just take on the role of helping him take care of his nieces and act as a nanny of sorts. So Lorelai decides to go along with it, and then as the story progresses, one thing leads to another between her and Jake, and the story takes off from there. So of course, this is another book that I'm really looking forward to diving into. I mentioned this in my other videos, but Lorelai is one of my favorite characters in the Beverly Jenkins universe. She actually appeared in another book that I read back in December called Always and Forever, and that's one of my favorite Beverly Jenkins novels ever. But she actually made her first appearance in that book, and I fell in love with her and her storyline, and I couldn't wait to see how she was going to end up, as well as get her a happy ending. And with this story, she's finally going to get it. The next book that I have here is Nightcrawling by Leila Motley. So this book I talked about in my end of year book tag video. I will leave that linked up above in the card somewhere, but I talked about how I wanted to get to this book before 2022 was over. That never happened. I actually didn't even get this book until I think in January, or whenever Barnes & Noble had their most recent hardcover sale. That's when I picked up this book, and I've actually been eyeing this book ever since it debuted. I have seen so many of my mutuals on Bookstagram take pictures of this book and talk about it in depth and their thoughts on it, and just the way that the book is described sounds so impactful and so interesting. I knew I needed to add this to my TBR, and I'm so happy that I finally have this now, and that I'll be able to read it during Black History Month. I just feel like this is one of those books that is just so important. You can tell that Leila Motley has a story to tell with this one. So I'm actually just going to read the synopsis for this book, because when I talked about it in my end of year book tag video, I realized that my synopsis was completely off. And so I'm just going to read the synopsis. But right here in the flap it says, a dazzling novel about a young Black woman who walks the streets of Oakland, a debut that announces a blazingly original voice. Kiara and her brother Marcus are scraping by in an East Oakland apartment complex, optimistically called the Regal High. Both have dropped out of high school, their family fractured by death in prison. But while Marcus clings to his dream of rap stardom, Kiara hunts for work to pay the rent, which has more than doubled, and to keep the 9-year-old boy next door, abandoned by his mother, safe and fed. One night, what begins as a drunken misunderstanding with a stranger turns into the job Kiara never imagined wanting but now desperately needs. Nightcrawling. Her world breaks open even further when her name surfaces in an investigation that exposes her as a key witness in a massive scandal within the Oakland Police Department. So as you can hear from the synopsis, this is going to be very heavy, very triggering, I'm sure. But like I said, I just know that this book is going to be so moving and so poignant just because of the topics that Leila Motley explores in here. I am very curious to see how the story is going to unfold, and I'm also very interested in learning more about Leila Motley. I think Leila Motley is the youngest person to be nominated for the Booker Prize Award, which from what I heard is a very prestigious award, and that's phenomenal, especially for her to be young and Black. Like, that is just so incredible to hear, and I love that for her. I'm very interested in learning more about her and her life, and to see if she has any other books. So once I finish Nightcrawling, I definitely think I'm going to do a deep dive. And also, this is another stunning cover. I should have kept my braids in, so that way when I take my review picture for this, I could have played on this cover, you know? I could have played on this one, but it's fine, y'all, it's fine. Either way, I just think that this is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm not a big fan of purple, but it works very well with this orange. The next book that I have here is Finding Jupiter by Khalees Rowe. So this is a book that I did not know about at all. Like, this wasn't even on my radar until I watched one of Lisa's from Babe and Libraries video, and she actually recommended this book. So shout out to her, because this book sounds like it's going to be right up my alley. So the only things that I know about this book is that it follows two characters named Orion and Ray, and Orion is the guy, I'm pretty sure, and Ray is the girl. And so Orion and Ray are both described as broken people. They both have a lot of trauma and just things that they endured in their past and in their childhood that they're still trying to work through. But they do end up crossing paths one day, and I think Orion is immediately smitten with Ray. I think he falls like head over heels in love with her very early on, and Ray ends up reciprocating those feelings, and she ends up falling in love with Orion too. But there's something either about Ray or going on in her life that is preventing her from loving Orion fully and openly and as much as she wants to. And the story takes off from there. So from what I've gathered, this is a star-crossed lover story, and y'all already know how I feel about a good star-crossed lover story. I'm not going to get into it, but if you know, you know. So I knew that this book was something that I needed to add to my library immediately, and that's exactly what I did. Another stunning cover, by the way. Like, I love this edition. There's also another cover of this book, and so I'm not sure if that's like the US version or the UK version. I don't know. I just know that this cover is my favorite. But going back to the actual book, I am fiending to get to this one. Y'all have no idea. Like, this might be one of the first books that I read in February just because of how interesting it sounds and because it hits on that star-crossed lovers trope. But what really sold it for me was the back of this book. So I actually read these blurbs on the back last night, and I got chills because it gave me a glimpse into how the writing and the prose is going to be in this book, and I am ready and I'm seated. So in the back here it says, "For a second, it's like I exist purely to be here, skating around in circles, following her, locked in her orbit. Orion is a bunch of stars, somewhere in the galaxy. But Ray, she's the sun." Orion looks at me, and his eyes write an entire love song. Is it even possible to see someone else's love at first sight? This boy's gonna want to love me, I can tell. My heart breaks for him because I'm not a girl to love. Y'all heard that, right? Y'all heard that. Like, oh, this is going to be a good story. I can just feel it in my bones that this is going to be a book that I'm probably going to love, and I'm definitely going to have to tab because that writing, chef's kiss, stunning. I love the part right here where it says, "Is it even possible to see someone else's love at first sight?" I love that so much. So yeah, definitely gonna have to make sure I have my annotation supplies ready because I just know that I'm probably going to tab and underline this book up. All right, y'all, we're almost done, and I have 3 more physical books on this TBR that I want to show you, and then I'm going to get into the books that I don't have physical copies of. So all 3 of these books, I'm just going to probably like rapid firely talk about them because I'm actually going to feature them in a reading vlog. And the 3 books that I have here are When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris, and Jackal by Aaron E. Adams. So I'm actually going to film a reading vlog where I read thrillers written by Black authors, and these are the 3 books that I currently have on my TBR that I really need to get to and I want to read, especially Jackal because this is actually a newer release, or I think it released back in like November or December of last year. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that this is still like a newer release, and I really need to get to this book because I have seen so many mixed reviews on it, a lot of polarizing reviews, but I need to form my own opinion on this. So definitely will be prioritizing this one for sure in that reading vlog, but I am really excited to read all 3 of these. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the books that I don't have physical copies of, and the first book that I have here is Hookshot by Kennedy Ryan. Let me clarify, I actually do have a physical copy of this book. You can see it sitting right here, but these are my special edition covers of the Hoop series, and so I don't like to read from these because they're very nice and beautiful and I don't want to mess them up. I do plan on getting physical copies of the Hoop series in the old covers so that way I can reread them and annotate them and not feel bad about it. But I do plan on reading this one on my iPad just like I did with the other books, but this is going to be a bittersweet read because this is another book in the Hoop series, but it is the final book in the Hoop series, and I am just devastated. I'm gutted. All of the buzzwords that you can think of because I do not want the series to end, which is why I dragged it out for so long and why I have not read Hookshot yet. But I realized that I need to stop doing that and I need to just close out these series so that way I can open myself up to other books and other series. I have way too many books on my TBR similar to other people, and it's not healthy nor wise for me to continue to like start series and just not finish them because I don't want them to end yet. First of all, this cover, get into it. This is a beautiful ass cover. The illustrator for this one in particular, gagged. I love this cover so much. This story actually follows Lotus and Keenan, and Lotus is the best friend of Iris who appears in the first book, Longshot. This is her best friend, Lotus. And Keenan is actually the best friend and teammate of August, who is the male MC in the first book and Iris's boyfriend in Longshot. The characters from the previous book do appear in the next book, so I'm sure that the characters from Longshot as well as the characters Banner and Jared from Blockshot, which is the second book in the series, are going to appear in this book, and I cannot wait for that little reunion because I love these characters so much and I love this multiverse of madness that Kennedy Ryan has created with the Hoop series. I can't wait to see what everybody else is up to. A deeply emotional standalone romance set in the worlds of professional basketball and high fashion. Divorced, single dad, traded to a losing squad. Cheated on, betrayed, exposed. My perfect life blew up in my face and I'm still picking up the pieces. The last thing I need is her. A wildflower, a storm, a woman I can't resist. Lotus Dupree is a kick to my gut and a wrench in my plans. From the moment our eyes meet, I promised myself I wouldn't trust a woman again, but I never wanted anyone the way I want Lo. She's not the plan I made, but she's the risk I have to take. A warrior, a baller, the one they call Gladiator. Keenan Ross charged into my life smelling all good, looking even better, and snatching my breath from the moment we met. The last thing I need is him. I'm working on me, facing my pain and conquering my demons. I've seen what trusting a man gets you. I don't have time for this. But he just keeps coming for me, keeps knocking down my defenses and stealing my excuses one by one. He never gives up, and now I'm not sure I want him to. All right, y'all, and this is the last book that I have on this TBR that I'm going to talk about today, and this book is A Few Days Full of Trouble, a memoir of the lynching of Emmett Till by Wheeler Parker and Christopher Benson. So as you can hear by the title, this is a memoir, and this memoir actually follows the cousin of Emmett Till. I think he's one of the only last surviving members of his family that like actually knew him and grew up with him. Don't quote me on that. I know that this is going to be an intimate account of time spent with Emmett leading up to the murder, as well as the murder itself, as well as the lasting impact. And so this is definitely going to be a heart-wrenching book. I know that this is going to be one of those that I'm going to have to probably take breaks in between. The Emmett Till case is just one of those cases that is so heartbreaking and so infuriating. So I just know that this is going to be an interesting reading experience. You guys know that I am really trying to get back into nonfiction full steam, and I'm trying to read one nonfiction book a month. And so this is the nonfiction book that I have decided to read. I'm actually going to listen to this via audiobook. I already have this queued up and ready to go. It's just waiting for me to press play. But that's how I'm going to read this book. And I just don't know if that's a great idea, because audiobooks, depending on the narrator and just the production of it, it can be just as emotional and devastating as you reading it physically, if not more. I'm very curious to see how Reverend Wheeler Parker recount their time with Emmett, and I'm very curious to see if they're going to have any commentary on the like most recent news, I guess, on Emmett Till's case when it involves the white woman that was apparently the catalyst for all of this. I forget her name, but the woman that I'm referring to is the woman that Emmett allegedly, which we all know now is a lie, but allegedly whistled at this woman, and that's what essentially led to this domino effect of Emmett being murdered. And so I'm very curious to see if they're going to have any commentary on that and what their thoughts are on her making that deathbed confession that it was all a lie, it was all a ruse. That still pisses me off, to be honest, but like I said, I'm just very curious to see what this book has to say. Right, and those are all of the books that I hope to get to in the month of February. As you can see, I have a lot of books on my TBR this month, and I don't know how I'm going to get to all of them, but I'm going to try my hardest, okay? And I'm going to try really hard to stick to my TBR like I did in January, and I don't think it'll be that huge of a problem, just because all of these books right here are books that I have been meaning to get to for some time, and or I just really want to read them regardless because they just sound so good, okay? All of these books sound like they're going to be hits. I hope they are, but we'll see. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps move my channel out. And lastly, please make sure you follow me on Bookstagram as well as Storygraph. I will leave all of that information linked down below, as well as at the end of the video. And now at the beginning of the video, like I always do, I will see you guys in my next video.